All right, good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Shantanu Rani. I manage the Cyber Physical Systems Security Research Area here at PARC, and I'd like to introduce our speaker today. Dr. Alissa Johnson is the Chief Information Security Officer for Xerox. She has over 2 decades of experience working in the area of information technology, both in the public and private sectors. And she's held a number of influential positions. Before joining Xerox, she was the Chief Information Security Officer for Stryker, the medical device manufacturing company. She was also the Deputy CIO for the White House during President Obama's 2nd term. She's held a Deputy CTO position at Lockheed Martin and also core engineering positions at Northrop Grumman and the US Department of Defense. Dr. Johnson holds a PhD in Information Technology Management, and she has served as adjunct faculty member, and she has designed courses and taught courses at several universities. And as if that's not enough, she somehow finds time to be an avid fan, follower, and subject matter expert on the topic of basketball. So I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Alissa Johnson to PARC Forum.
Thank you. Thank you. Let me move this back just a smidgen. There we go. Oh, I might have moved back just a little too much. So I came this morning. I was so super excited. Admittedly, a bit intimidated. You know, we from Washington, D.C., we come to Silicon Valley, and we're talking to all of the smart people. This is what we think on the East Coast. We think that all the smart people, of course, are in Silicon Valley, which is so true. And I actually spent all day today at PARC and talking to the researchers and being overwhelmed with all of the great information that was being shared and all of the great innovation that is happening at PARC, and said to myself, okay, I think I need my boost of confidence, so I'm ready to go back home and talk to my 5-year-old, right? But I've had a great day today, and I wanted to talk to you about cybersecurity. And I don't think I'm going to impart any grand wisdom, right? A lot of times there are thoughts and ramblings and things that kind of make you think twice about maybe how we kind of conceptualize the future, the thoughts of the future, how we will react to security in the future and things like that. And so that's kind of what I want to talk to you about today. I have some metrics for you, though, that I want to start the conversation off with. 61% of large enterprises suffered from at least one security breach from their print infrastructure. 61%. This was last year. And when I learned that metric, I thought, wow, really? Because that's not really what you hear about in the news, right? You don't really hear about print infrastructure being breached. But 61%. 72% of organizations reported that they had a large concern over the insecure print infrastructure that they had. That's 72% of organizations. That is definitely an indicator that the Internet of Things is definitely very serious, that print infrastructures are very serious, and then we also need to be thinking in terms of cybersecurity and the future of cybersecurity. And that's one of the things I hate for people to ask me about, is the future. And I'll tell you why, but I want to piggyback and just kind of give you some more data points about me. I am Dr. Alissa Johnson. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer for Xerox. I was very eloquently introduced and almost had to look around and say, okay, maybe this week isn't my week, because I didn't know you were really talking about me. I have children from the ages of 6 to 21. I have 3 chickens. When you have 6 kids, you go through the whole gamut of pets. And so now we've landed on chickens, and that's been the highlight of our days so far. I play violin and piano. What else can I tell you? I am a NSA certified cryptologic engineer. I have a PhD in information technology management. I kind of give you all of these things hoping that at some point it will boost either my level of confidence or my credentials to you, so that you see me as at least someone that you want to spend the next hour with, or hour and a couple of minutes with. But when I think about the future of cybersecurity, I'm going to start off with three things. First, we can't prevent anything from happening, and we will never be bulletproof. And so if we start out right there with that basic understanding, then we can have a really good conversation. Because anyone who says I can stop something from happening, it's just not, is really not where we are, right? The whole idea is to make it more expensive so that it's so expensive for the adversary to continue to attack your platform that they move on to the next person. That's really what the goal should be. So when people ask me about the future of cybersecurity, there is no real future. Why is there no real future? Because it's many different factors that influence the future, and so it's, how will breaches impact the future? It's an amalgamation of all of these different questions, and these are just some of them. How will breaches affect us in the future? Will they still be as polarizing? Will we not be so uncomfortable because we've been breached so many times? And as I like to say, will we be out-breached or over-breached where it doesn't even matter anymore? What about data privacy? Will we even care? I remember probably about 15 years ago, you would ask someone for their social security number and people would say, oh no, I can't give my social security number. And now it's like, yeah, this is it, and I'm sure it's out there somewhere to be found. So I'm very comfortable giving that information away. So will we now be more comfortable with our information being out there, and will data privacy be a non-issue? Will the impacts or costs be more severe? So when we think about what's going on in the European Union, they've got these new stringent requirements that are out. We have to abide by them by May of 2018. And so will the impacts and costs be as severe, or will we be at a point where we've been breached so many times, I don't even know if I care to have another credit monitoring offering. They're overlapping at this point. And so will that make a difference? Will anyone even care? Like we had a breach with Equifax happen maybe three weeks ago, probably about 3 weeks ago, and now we just hear about Deloitte, which just came out in the news this week. And so, is it going to be so repetitive and happen so many times that we won't even care? And so the whole point of that is the change in any one of these shifts the future. So you can't ask, what is the future of cybersecurity, without saying, well, what is the future of all of these different elements? Because a change in any one of those elements changes the trajectory of the rest of the future. So I talked a lot about this with Jacob Morgan. He has this same idea with technology. He's a social media, he's an influencer. He says the same thing about technology. You can't say what is the future of technology because there's AI, there's data, there are all of these different elements that cause us to think about this a little bit differently. And so the question now becomes, are we prepared for this unknown? So now that I've even kind of given you this fear of I don't even know what the future is, how can I tell you what the future of cybersecurity is? Well, there are a lot of things that impact us in that. And the entry points are going to be numerous as we think about the threats. The threats are going to come from all of these different areas. And in the middle of this circle, I have the IoT security challenges. And we can put that and change that IoT to be network security challenges, to be data security challenges, to be infrastructure security challenges. They're all going to be the same. It's all going to play into our role of these different threats. And these threats are going to come from all of these different places. And so when I think about this with my Xerox hat on, I think, okay, I've got threats from the employees that I consider the employees are like all of my friends. All 30,000+ of them are all my friends. So I've got friendly threats, right? I've got unfriendly threats, because now I've got hackers and people who just want to embarrass me or want to embarrass the company or want to embarrass or just kind of get their own credibility, right? So I'm thinking in terms of those people, these are all threats. Then I've got data that I can't control because data now has its own set of legs, and I don't even know where it's going and how I can continue to reel it in. And then I have, of course, my lovely Xerox printer or my device. This is just standing in the place of any device. And if I think about it from my home, we have a smart home, or consider it a smart home. Everything is connected. I've got a microwave that's connected. I've got a refrigerator, oven, my Nest, thermostat. It's all connected. And the next thing my husband now is connecting the garage door openers, so that when the car pulls up, the garage door is going to automatically come up for me, and I'm loving it. And I told him as soon as he gets something that will wash and fold clothes, then this marriage is going to last forever. But this is just, all of these different things are going to create different challenges, and the threats are going to come and work their way into all of these different areas. And now my network is not just my network at work. I'm thinking about my home network too. Oh my goodness. And then I have this nebulous thing called the cloud, right? And all of the challenges that brings, because not only do I have to worry about the information and my good data that I think I am protecting in my own home network, but I've got to worry about what Google's doing to my Gmail, what Apple may be doing, or some other company who may be hosting your pictures and things like that. I've got to worry about all of these things. And so these are all of the different entry points that kind of make me, afraid. They make me afraid in a sense, because now I've got all of these different entry points that I'm thinking about from my employee-owned devices and then the people from the outside. And I should have put my family down there, because I've got, they are a threat to my network as well. There's no telling what Roblox is a famous game that my daughter plays. There's no telling what that is going to introduce into my home network. Or, if I decide to bring her to work for Bring Your Daughter to Work Day, and she wants to play Roblox on my laptop, oh my goodness, what is that now doing, and what is that now introducing into the network? And so all of these things, all of these threats are going to grow as we continue to connect, as we continue to engage each other and want to do more and be more comfortable and want to enable ourselves through the use of technology. Because technology is actually pulling us along in this whole journey. Technology, at first we said, no, I don't need to take a picture with my phone and connect to the internet with my phone and have my phone store all of my data and all, no, there's no way I'm gonna wanna do this. And now, why would I even go to Disney World with 6 kids and have all of these different things I've gotta carry around and carry a camera? Why would I even do that? So technology is kind of bringing us along on this ride, almost whether we wanna be a part of it or not. And so that's the challenge in all of this. Security now has to be thought of in various layers. And so when I think about it in various layers, I'm thinking about building a house. And the first is going to be infrastructure. I've got to have a really solid infrastructure. And so in my security, I've got to have infrastructure security. I got to focus on safety, because that's not going to go away. There's no way we're going to be able to upgrade every single thing, every single time, right on the cusp of the rollout of the latest software. It's just not possible. So now, how do we protect that legacy equipment and allow it to sunset easily without being breached? The other thing about infrastructure security, which you may think about, are the basics. I had a great discussion today about how we focus a lot on the shiny widgets. We focus a lot on the great innovation, the new things that are out there, but then we forget about sometimes the basics. If you think about all of the breaches that you've heard about in the past, I would say the past 3 years, I may even extend it to 4 years. Any breach or incident that you may have heard about may have been the impetus for that, or the foundation, the fertile ground that was laid for that, was because some of the basics were missing. I'll give you another example. Just extend that just a little bit. Even when I think about my time at the White House in the Obama administration. And I can talk about this because healthcare.gov was not a part of the executive office of the president. It was a part of HHS. That was their system. So I can talk about this and say that I did not, was not impacted by that specifically. We went and helped out in some ways. But when you think about a lot of the publicly known failures of healthcare.gov, was because testing, some of the testing was missing. People were trying to rush and do things. And so there was some basic elements that kind of fell through the cracks. And this is how we operate sometimes in terms of technologists and us being experts in cybersecurity and the things that we do. It's a humanistic part. We run towards the shiny object and we forget that we still have to mop and dust and sweep and, but we'll put a nice new carpet down, right? These are things that are really, really important when you think about the infrastructure. Also, when I think about the infrastructure, I have to think about my most valuable assets. We're now moving into a time where the one-size-fits-all effect does not work anymore. And so I can't do a broad brushstroke and say, I want this level of encryption on all the data. I just can't do that. The investment dollars just aren't there. Even in any organization that you think of, you want your investments to be in the right place. And what we call that is we want our investments to be in our crown jewels. Those things that are holding our most powerful data, our most expensive data, any personal data, those are our crown jewels. That's where all of the special sauce is. And we want to put our investments there. And then kind of look at all of the other pieces of data and kind of prioritize that and say, well, maybe there's an opportunity to provide some other levels of service over those pieces of infrastructure. But I want my big investments to be on those things that are going to cost me the most money, amount of money if I lose it. So that's infrastructure security. The other part of this layer now is application security. And why do I care about application security? Well, we get a lot of questions. The people say applications and security has to be baked in. I hate that. It's very, very cliche. Security needs to be baked in and not layered on. It's very, very true. But why do they say that? They say that because there are many times when information security is kind of complicated. We've it in certain ways where it invites the opportunity to not be invited. Follow me. So we have developers, and I'm not saying we as in Xerox, I'm saying we as in technologists and kind of the way we think of things. We have developers and we want them to build these great systems and these great things. And then we say, well, how is security going to impact my user experience, right? As they're developing, that's one of the main questions. And from a security side, I'm saying, well, wait a minute. Security is part of the user experience. That is the user experience because security is the differentiator. If technology is the enabler, then security is the differentiator. So therefore, security is part of the user experience. So it's when we break those thought processes down that now we're able to make some jumps into how do we think in the future about cybersecurity and how do we better anticipate our threats. Mobility is going to be super, super important, right? It's important now, but now we want to continue to do things. I want to, and this was some of the great research that they're doing at PARC. I'd love to be able to walk up to my printer and just have my mobile device and kind of put it close to the printer and it automatically prints my document. I'd love to do that, right? And I don't have to press anything. It's just, either between Bluetooth or some other functionality. I would love to be able to do that. I would love to be able to do that at home. But that opens up some other doors for me. And so I have to think about this in terms of mobility and my apps and application security and how we now do all of that in a secure way because I want it to print to my printer. I don't want it to print to my printer and my dad's printer and my grandmother's printer. I don't want that to happen either. I want to have some control over that. And I don't want a hacker to be able to come in and control where my phone is going to print to either. So application security is going to be super, super important. The next part of this, data security. So now I'm kind of building my house. I think the data part is the gooey part in the inside. We have to focus on the privacy piece, right? Because that privacy piece is the piece now that really affects all of us. That's why we care now about security, the credit monitoring and all of that. You know, companies were being breached, companies were being impacted, and incidents were happening. I say, this is my thought, my opinion. Incidents were happening within cybersecurity and different companies for a long time. For a long time. Now we care because it affects us, right? It affects our, now my credit, credit score may be impacted, and my personal information, and someone may be able to get a credit card based on knowing my social security number and all of this data that they have on me now. So now the data security and my privacy is kind of being impacted, and now I really, really care. And so then I think of it in terms of, and today's talk is about the future. When I think about the future, I told you all, my house is very connected. It's a smart home. We have cameras everywhere. I would hate for a hacker to hack into my camera and say, oh, we've got a picture of Dr. J cooking eggs and bacon in the morning, and she told us she hates bacon, you know? I don't want that to happen. So that's really, really, important to me as I think about the future, because now not only do I have to think about the future in its current state, but I have to think of the future in its future state, which means I've got to think about all the other possibilities that all of this technology is bringing into my life and into my household. So it's really, really important to me. You know, we hear a lot about, or I hear, just because I'm on that security kind of spooky side almost, but I hear a lot about webcams on the computer, and people walk around with a little sticky piece of tape over their webcam because they're afraid someone is going to break into it. And I have one on mine right now. But it's things like that that we have to think about now that new cell phones are coming out with facial recognition that will unlock your phone. Well, a lot of people tell me that my sister and I look alike. I don't think we do, but I hope my phone doesn't either. My husband and I have been married for years. People say once you are around your spouse for a while, you start looking alike. I don't know if I want his face to open my phone. It's just a different thought process for me. So we have to think about that in terms of the data and now how the data is being manipulated and how we're being impacted by the data as well. Then there's this whole idea, and I think about this a lot, digital rights management, which means I can manage the data. It means I can send an email or forward a document to you. And if I don't want you to forward it, then there's some digital rights management. This is my layman's term, easy way of trying to explain it for anyone who is not, the research scientist level. But it allows me to have some management over, no, this can't be, if you try to forward it, it can't be read, or if you try to copy it again or edit it, it can't be edited. Those digital rights management. So I want that, I want to kind of be able to protect that. And how do we feed that now into the future and say, okay, now that I have management capability on some of my documents, because it's used a lot in the government space. It's used a lot sometimes in the music industry and protecting data going back and forth. It's used a lot in a lot of proprietary instances. But now that I think about my own data, how am I able to capitalize on digital rights management and say I send an email to this gentleman up here in the front and I don't want him to send it to someone else? How do I prevent that from happening? That's going to be really, really important in the future when we think about data security. And then that continuous monitoring. The continuous monitoring of that flow of data, that information flow and the security around our data is going to continue to grow. It's going to grow to a massive scale where I really think it's going to be almost unmanageable because we have these now big data sets. And I'll talk about that some more in a second, but I want to talk about these big data sets that we have. And now that we have all this big data, like what are we going to do with it? And how long are we going to keep it? And If we keep it forever, then we've got to have some place to continue to store all of this big data. That's going to continue to play a role. Now that I have to store all of this big data, I've got to protect all of this big data. Now that I have to protect all of this big data, then hackers are going to continue to try to infiltrate and contaminate that data, right? And so this story goes on and on and on and on. And so I have to think about that in terms of data security. The last part of this, the foundation, are all of my processes. And I think this is super, super important because each of these different layers creates the big picture, the nice house here. You've got to focus on closing the gaps of our processes. A lot of times our processes, we leave them kind of loosey-goosey. They're not stringent enough to provide the structure that we need. But it's really a difficult thing to do because we want them stringent enough to protect, but loose enough so that they're agile enough. You don't have to continuously update them in order to keep the pace of innovation. It's really tricky. It's hard to kind of stay in that area, but that's what we have to do. But there's a requirement there. When I also think about security processes, I've kind of taken this from a lot of the different experience that I've had. A lot of times we will have, and I'm talking about we as people, society, we will have at our jobs a culture that dictates the security governance. We'll say, oh no, we can't do multi-factor authentication. Are you kidding me? The Salesforce will never accept that. Or we can't, and you think, well, wait a minute. I'm sure they have Gmail. I'm sure they do at-home banking. They're doing multi-factor authentication just through at-home banking. So why can't we do it here? Why can't we do some of those things? And it's sometimes the difficulty we put on ourselves, I think. I think it's the difficult, because the technology sometimes isn't difficult. It's the culture that makes it a little more difficult. And so when we think about it at home, we're like, oh yeah, I don't mind doing multi-factor authentication. When we get to work, we're like, I don't know, it's maybe 3 or 4 extra steps. So we have to change that paradigm. The governance has to dictate to the culture what's best in terms of security. And that's how we continue to move forward. That's how we continue to push innovation in a secure way. That's the only way we'll push innovation in a secure way, is by making sure we have the right governance structure there first, and then teaching the culture why, and teaching the culture how, because normally the culture will say, well, wait a minute, this makes sense, and I can implement some of these same things at home. So that's super important to me, and I think about security processes and why we do the things we do. So cybersecurity based on layers, right? And each of these layers is going to be important. They have to be congruent and non-tangential. They have to align, and there's synergy between all of them. And so I think data security, application security, infrastructure security, process security, those are the things. There's nothing you can think of that doesn't fall into one of those areas. Even if I think about me, people, processes, and technology, it falls into those areas. And so all of those areas are equally important. But I want to talk about the next step. So I've talked about these different layers. The next step is external partnerships. External partnerships are going to be super critical as we think about the future. So I remember being at the White House. This is great. This is great. This is me at the White House. Me at the White House. I had more friends than I could shake a stick at, okay? I had more help than I ever wanted. I would drop a spoon and I'd have, I had DIA, CIA, all of the intelligence community. I had all of the, other agencies ready to help. It's just the environment that we have. We want to all help. That's just kind of where we are. This is me at Xerox. My group is growing. My steady group of friends are growing, right? But the point of this is, you hear a lot about the public and private partnerships and the need to share information. I'll tell you why that need is so important. If I think about this from a hacker perspective, from the wrong side of the law, I'll tell you, this works in my head. There are hackers in basements, and they're in a dark room, and they want to do something really bad, and they search the dark web, and they find it, just like that. And they either find it for free, They find it for $12.99, or they can easily write it with a whole bunch of components. This is how it works. Well, maybe not exactly how it works, but somehow it works like similar to that. If I think about it from my side and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have this issue, I need some help with it, I go out and I say, well, you know, let me contact this CISO, or let me contact this government agency. And we're so tight with our information and we don't want to share it. We're afraid to share it. We're afraid to share it either because of embarrassment, or either because we don't want to disclose what our vulnerabilities are. It may impact us in some way. This is the difference between the right side of the law and the wrong side of the law. The right side of the law is really in some ways acting on fear of repercussions. The wrong side of the law says, hey, I'm putting it all out there. This is going to help me with my street cred. This is going to help me get momentum and get my name out there. And so they are sharing information constantly, which is why they are able to win, and they are able to gather their arms together in order to defeat, you know, the system, right? It's just, and they don't even know each other. That's my point. They don't even know each other. I'm trying to build that same network, and that's what we have to do in terms of external partnerships. So let me do a quick plug for Xerox. One of the things that we do at Xerox, we have a great partnership with McAfee. We have included certain McAfee security layers inside of our print offering. So now you are not just getting a Xerox print offering, you're getting a McAfee and a Xerox print offering. We're coming as a partnership. And I always say this, Xerox did not hire me. The White House did not get me because I am Dr. J and they thought I was fabulous. I don't think that. I think that my network is great as well. And so they looked at my network and said, hey, if anything happens, she's got a vast network that we should be doing. That is the same thing that we're doing at Xerox. We're building a network. We're building what that story is and how it continues to evolve, so that you're not just buying one thing. There should not be a company that says, hey, I've given you one great secure device. It's yours. It doesn't work like that, because it's not one and done. Security is not one and done. Security is a community effort. It is an effort of getting everyone involved in this process. And so the more partners that we have, the more security we can continue to bring to bear. So I think external partnerships is super, super critical. The next part of this, cognitive security. So I've talked about the security layers, I've talked about external partnerships, and my last part of this is the cognitive security part. And what I mean by cognitive security is there's all of these different areas that are super important. We have data sets and big data and data analytics, and those people now are being cultivated into the workforce to help us analyze all of this big data set. But the problem is there. The problem is we've stopped at the analytics, because now human intervention is too afraid to let anything happen past that. I'll explain. So we are in this avenue now where with machine learning, where data is gathered, data is learned, and then the smart people in the organizations will say, okay, now that I have all of this, I've got the data analytics engines, they're telling me certain things. Now that I have all of this, I am going to create a policy that goes onto the network that does something for me, that protects my device. That's where it stops. That's where I want to make sure you understand the transition between what's happening with the system and what the human intervention is. The disruptive part of the future should be that momentum continues, that the human intervention part of that is being taken out, and there's a certain amount of information, a certain level that we as human beings should be comfortable with allowing a system to do for us. And that's really disruptive, because as security professionals and as technologists, we don't want a system doing anything we didn't tell it to do. But then on the other hand, we already talked about the fact that we're not doing the basic things, right? We're not doing the basic cybersecurity practices at sometimes. And so my thought, and I'll just give you a good quick example. My quick example is, you know, we have ports open. So for those who aren't the researchy type, ports, I have one machine here, I have one machine here. They have to talk to each other. They have to talk the same language, and so they have to talk through a port. And that port is open for continuous communication, okay? And a lot of systems, those ports are open. You open it for a specific reason, and then all of a sudden, the port is still open, but there's no talking. And you go back and you do your other thing, and you're working on the shiny widget, and no one remembers to go back and close that port. This is how hackers are getting in. This is a huge exposure. This is an easy way. Hackers will go and they'll knock on all of the doors. And if your door is open, if your port is open, and there's no talking, the hacker can get right on in. If they not get in, hackers are very, very patient. Very patient. So they may not get in and do anything immediately. They're just going to sit there and look, study, figure it out. And then 3 years from now, you'll wonder, well, wait a minute. I've got 2 cents coming out of my account every 3 days. And I never really noticed it, but it was just constant. And that's just how it works. I'm not saying they're going to take money out of your account just because you had an open port, but I'm just saying that is just a mechanism for hackers to get into your network. And so if we think about this from a cognitive security perspective, right? I've got a machine that's on the network, that's learning, that says, wait a minute, there's something happening on the network, there's a port open, nothing's talking, I'm going to just close it. I don't have to wait for someone to put a policy in place in order to close the port. I'm just going to close it myself, and I'll send the systems admin a note saying, hey, port whatever was closed on this date at this time, nothing's communicated on it in the past 2 months. That's cognitive security. That's security and AI engines and machine learning working for us on our behalf. And now we can continue to do great things. Because I'll tell you this, if I go back to my team and say, wait a minute, I want you to analyze this port. And they say, well, nothing has been talking on this port, but we can't close it because if we close it, someone's going to scream. We don't know who it belongs to. We don't know why it was open. And we'll spend another 6 months trying to figure that part out, right? And that's how these things happen. That's how we kind of have all of these different levels of exposure. And so cognitive security gives us the ability to kind of use the advancements that they're thinking about just from a technology perspective. Now, how do we use that from a security perspective? So I remember at the time at the White House where we had State of the Union. State of the Union is like the Super Bowl of the White House. It is the time where we prepare all year for the State of the Union. From a security perspective, we can take a look at the transcripts or thoughts and the order that the president may be speaking on certain topics, and we can follow the IP addresses. Oh, he's getting ready to talk about gun control. Oh, yeah. Or he's getting ready to talk about the global climate or the environment. Oh, yeah, there's a nation state that doesn't like that. Oh, that's where that attack's coming from. And it's very interesting to watch. Because as he changes his comments, and as he changes, and it happens, I'm not saying this just happens during State of the Union, but it happens during our administration. You could watch the day. He says something, more attacks from this area. He says something else, more attacks from this area, special interest groups. It's so funny, though, because with State of the Union, it all happens in like a 2-hour period. And so you see it kind of going up and down, and you can look at the map and say, oh, my goodness, this is crazy. It's great. Unfortunately, the world is just not that predictive, right? We could predict that from our perspective because we did a lot of learning and found a lot of trending in that area. But the rest of the world is not that predictive. And so the future is not that predictive. And so technology is not that predictive. And so cybersecurity is not that predictive. And so that's why we've got to have cognitive security to help us learn and help us do these things for us. Then we can spend our time kind of doing other advancements and kind of figuring those other things out and kind of anticipating the threats and figuring out what the next move is going to be. So this is what I think the future of cybersecurity is. I think it's layered for sure. And these layers may even grow when we start thinking about utilities, when we start thinking about the physical aspect, because I did not include the physical aspect in this. But when we start thinking about the physical aspect, that'll be included in these layers. It will be partner-based. Now, I will probably push the envelope at some point and say, well, I have a security operations center, and maybe Capital One has a security operations center, and maybe we should kind of look over each other's things and create a partnership so that I have a fresh set of eyes looking at something, and they have a fresh set of eyes looking at something, and that would be really, really great. We're not there yet. That's just an opportunity, a possibility that will enrich not only the people, but enrich our environment as well. You know, a lot of people think the financial sector or entertainment or document technology, they don't have anything in common. Like, why are you friends with the CISO of Sony? Well, what I found in my transformation between the public sector and the private sector and kind of going back and forth, what I found is hackers are using the same methods and the same tools. What they're getting is different, but they're using the same tools and the same methods. I found that out as I came to Stryker and as I came here, and so wait a minute, this is the same tool that they were trying to use when we were at the White House. What are you doing? Xerox, of course, isn't holding any nuclear codes, but they're using the same method to get to different pieces of information. And so that's why the synergy is the same. When you boil it all down, those external partnerships are going to be super important to continue to help us grow. And then the last part of this, of course, is cognitive security. How do we allow, and how much are we going to allow artificial intelligence and machine learning to now play a role, and us not be impacted by that, but us be involved in how it plays a role in our new future of cybersecurity? That's all I have. Thank you. Questions? Questions? Any questions? I will answer just about anything, even if you want to know about the president. It's certain things, but certain things I might have to kill you before you leave.
Thank you. How should we be thinking about the trade-offs between usability and security?
So I think we hinder ourselves when we think about the trade-offs. I think when we think of it from there was a large time, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, where they called it the commercialization of IT, the consumerization of IT, those kind of words they use kind of interchangeably. Usability cannot impact, cybersecurity cannot impact usability. It shouldn't. We are the smart people, and I challenge my team with this. We are the smart people where we shouldn't say, well, it's going to be extra hard. It's going to be more complicated if we implement this type of security control. We can't think from that perspective. If we thought from that perspective, then we wouldn't have multi-factor authentication. Now, I do think that there are easier ways of doing things, and I do think sometimes we overcomplicate our methods, and that is our challenge in order to continue to move at the pace of innovation. You know, we've got to now streamline some of our processes and streamline some of the usability of it as well, and how we want to implement that. But I think there has to be synergy between the two, and there can't be a compromise, right? Because if it's too difficult to use, you're not gonna use the control.
So I've read that something like 3/4 of enterprise breaches start with a phishing attack.
Mm-hmm.
You never even mentioned that.
So phishing being an entry way in, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to be a part of the future, right? Because before there was phishing, there were viruses. There was Melissa, there was the I love you, you know, but it's now phishing mechanism to get in. That's going to change. I think when we think about the future, it may not even be phishing anymore. It may be, in fact, we still have enterprises that allow flash drives. There's easier things than that. There are easier ways, as a matter of fact, to get in than phishing. Phishing, and if you all don't know what that is, phishing, spear phishing, you think about it from a sport. You throw a spear, you hit one, you've won, you're right. That's the whole goal of phishing. Well, that's my woman's view of spear phishing, the sport. I might be all wrong. But it happens the same way from a technology instance. Hackers flood the network with all of these different emails, hoping that someone will click on one and put their credentials in, and now the system is compromised. It is a mechanism to get in, but maybe not. But I tell you what, there's so many different controls that are now being built to prevent that, that I think there's something new and better that's coming in the future that's going to be easier to get in. Phishing attacks, because now we all know about them. Like my mother sends me an email with angels almost every week, and I'm just not going to open it because I'm desensitized to it at this point.
So I may be misinterpreting the model you presented, but it appears to me that it's focused on large monolithic corporations or enterprises, and small in number and dealing, one with another, for example. I'm much more interested in the question of what does security mean to an entire society like we have, where I have literally hundreds of organizations and entities that I interact with. And a side question to that is what happens when there are serious dislocations in the power to control information and who, say, should have the rights to it. So DRM has been a historical case in that regard.
It has. So when you talk about the society being impacted by information security in the future, and I think about this, you're right, I talk a lot from a enterprise perspective, but I'll tell you this, I'm talking from a perspective of not just enterprise, but government as well. Because when you think about the OPM breach, that came through a small company. So that was not necessarily controls and things that were in place in the larger perspective, but it's the smaller companies that are now being impacted. When I think about the Internet of Things, it's the smaller, it's us, it's society. That's how people are getting in. And so that's why I always talk about the governance model needing to teach the culture, not the culture teaching the governance model. Because if the governance teaches the culture, then that trickles down into the rest of society, right? The culture then is not driving me. My governance model and how we now do things differently is driving me. And so when you think about it in terms of society, it's the governance model that has been forced upon us in our banking systems. We have to do two-factor. I'm trying to think if there's a bank that I have that doesn't require me to do two-factor authentication. That is now governance driving society, but it's not driving me from an enterprise perspective. It's driving me from my daily life. And I think that is where it will play a bigger role. Security is going to play a bigger role because no matter what, the culture is going to change because our everyday lives outside of our jobs, outside of the enterprises and places that we work, our everyday lives are going to continue to change and morph, whether we like it or not, because our data is out there, our data is being used, and now we're being impacted by it. You asked me a follow-on question that I don't remember.
It was really about dislocations in power structures and control of information.
Oh, and digital rights management. And so as we think about this in terms of, and I've given this a lot of thought in terms of document technology and document workflow, and I think about it in my example about me sending the email to the man in the front. I think that it'll be more important in terms of data privacy, because now data privacy, because it affects all of us, is so super important that we have to now have some controls, better controls, and better adherence to our own data privacy requirements. And we have to determine what those requirements are for us. And I don't think there's anything out there yet, because digital rights management is still, I don't think, prevalent enough from a society perspective, is not out there enough from a society perspective to put that everyone in here knows what that is and knows how to use it in their daily lives or has a tool to use that. So I think that has some definite need for advancement as we think about data privacy and in the future.
Hi, thanks for a very interesting talk. From a government perspective, what's the thinking on cybersecurity with regards to a nation's borders or territories in terms of protections?
In terms of protections?
Protections and rights and, yeah, government control.
So it's a loaded question, because it requires a lot of opinion, and that opinion may not be that of the previous administration or the current administration. But I think we have some responsibility when it comes to, it's a double-edged sword. You want some level of responsibility of our data, right? But then on the other hand, if you impact or impart some level of responsibility and accountability on our data, then how much of globalization are you putting out? So it's really a double-edged sword, and you can't, I don't know if you can necessarily have it both ways. I think that
I guess I was thinking on what influence the government can in such an open environment like the internet because of that, international law stuff.
So I think governments play a specific role when we think in terms of GDPR, right? GDPR is, please, I may get the acronym wrong, but it's the European Data Privacy Law that's going to be coming into act in May of 2018. And it is part of the European Union that says if you have data that belongs to a citizen of the European Union, you have to protect it in this way, and if that data is breached, they have to give you the authority to use that data in that way. And if you stray from using it in that way, you could also be fined for that. So you're giving consent. So I think, and I'm talking from a European Union now perspective, that even though they have given that law, enacting that, it is now impacting us here in the United States. It's impacting us everywhere globally from that perspective, because now we are being forced to do more things in terms of data privacy, data security, in order to make sure we're not fined because we're interacting with folks from the European Union. So I think governments definitely have a role and definitely have an impact just from small things that they do to protect their constituents' data. Not even talking about, interacting globally, because that's what the European Union really talks about, is how you will impact and how you will affect and interact with data that belongs to citizens of the European Union. And because, earlier I talked about the fact that data has legs now, that means no one is exempt from this. I probably didn't answer your question.
First thing is congratulations for working in the White House with President Obama. That sounds really cool.
It was.
You have this view of the future as security as being kind of a chronic disease that we're going to be dealing with. And we solve performance. I mean, this is a supercomputer for all intents and purposes. We solved connectivity. I can talk to anybody in the world with this thing practically. So we've solved these really hard problems, and you seem to think that security is just going to be with us. Okay.
So I had some great discussions today, and I'm going to steal something that was a great example. I'm going to use it today and probably use it forever and make it and pretend like it was mine, my own idea. Now, I'll tell you the problem that we haven't solved. We treat security, we treat systems as if there is this big protection layer around it, right? And if you can't penetrate that layer around it, then you're good. Or even if you penetrate it a little bit and get to maybe some of the other areas, you're good. If you think about the body doesn't act like that. If I stick something in my hand and try to leave it there, it's going to try to self-heal. It's going to try to even maybe push it out in certain instances. Our systems don't do that. And when our systems are now smart enough and able enough to be immune systems, right, then you can move towards and say, okay, now security isn't a chronic disease. Because now I have tools in place. Right now I have tools in place. I have vendors that help me with symptoms. I don't have vendors or external partnerships that help me cure and create antibodies. I don't have that. And so that's why I think your term is correct, is a really good one, and I probably will use that too. It's a chronic disease. It may be a chronic disease if we don't mature it enough so that we have now tools that help, when something is in, automatically respond and push it out. So it'd be great if systems worked like our bodies worked in its perfect state, because my knees are bad.
Johnson, this was very illuminating. Let's thank our speaker again.
Thank you.
So just before you leave, we're going to have our next forum. Actually, can you switch to the next slide? It's on it's on here. Okay, so we'll just switch over to the next slide.
Mm-hmm.
They just
There
have
it
it?
is.
Okay. So we're having a session on robots and telepresence. We will have some robots up here. It will be some folks that will be on beams. If you're not familiar, these are robots with the faces of folks that will be off-site. I believe they're going to be in the Midwest. We have Dr. Leila Takayama, who used to work here at PARC, and then our own fellow, Dr. Victoria Bellotti, who will be leading the panel. So please come. It's going to be on October 19th, Thursday, same time, 5 p.m., 5 to 6:30. So thank you for coming. Thanks, Dr. J.
Thank you.